Hey guys, I'm Bobby Childs from Adventures in Whiskey. Thanks for joining us tonight on episode 6. Can you believe it? 6 of another round. Almost forgot the name. You guys know me. I'm from Adventures in Whiskey. You can find me on all the social media channels. I got the blog. I just started another YouTube series of reviews. But enough about me. I've got several other fantastic people that are all into whiskey. That you may know from the from YouTube. Guys, introduce yourselves, please.
I'll go first, I guess, and I don't know if I fit in that group of the stellar guys that are here with you. But thanks for having me, Scott, with the Scotch Test Dummies. Half of the Scotch Test Dummies, Bart, very seldom makes live streams outside of our channel, but he's actually on vacation this week. And I'm warming up with a little bit of the Jim Beam Distiller's Cut.
That's awesome. How you doing, guys? This is Jason from the Mash and Drum. Nice to see you for another round again. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for getting together, guys. I am starting off tonight with a select single barrel select single malt Stranahan's out of Colorado. Absolutely love this stuff. It's cask strength and it's delicious.
All right, guys. I'm John from Blind Whiskey Reviews, the absolute best blind whiskey review channel available in the world. I'm warming up with a little bit of Weller Antique. Get the palate bumping.
Definitely the best blind whiskey review channel on the stream tonight.
Definitely.
Yeah, by far. Blowing the competition away.
Yes.
They didn't even show up. They were so scared.
Yeah. All right, guys. So I'm Scott with My Bourbon Journey. Thanks for having me on again this last month, and didn't want to do that. So glad to be back on. And tonight I'm starting out with a little bit of the Bardstown Bourbon Company. Their kind of one of their original releases, the collaboration series. This is the one that was finished in the American barrels.
So I'm drinking Blanton's, and if you follow me on Instagram, we'll get right to it, guys. If you follow me on Instagram, yesterday I posted something about Blanton's. When did Blanton's become so damn popular that you can't find it anymore? When did that happen? Did I fall asleep? I didn't get a fax. I didn't get an email. I didn't get a text message. What happened?
I think probably about the same time that Weller 12 became a $200 bottle.
Yeah, I think from just the bourbon boom in general and Blanton's being such an I actually just mentioned this on my stream last week when I put all the 4 Mash Bill 2 bottles head to head set, and Blanton's came in last, which was surprising, but it happened. And the interesting thing is that when you kind of still think about it, I had all those 4 bottles lined up against each other. Blanton's just, there's something about it. I don't think there's a bottle that has a better combination of marketing, story, collectability, lore around it. And now, John Wick freaking drinks the stuff, so it makes it a little bit more badass. It's just gotten more popular over time. And anybody that goes to the Buffalo Trace Distillery during this bourbon boom and sees how it's made and seeing how it's hand bottled and handwritten and the hand wax and the whole story behind it, I think it just kind of builds up the lore around it. It really does.
It's not a bad bourbon though. It's just when you stack it, when you look at it against others, I think you see that there's other better whiskeys out there.
Yeah, but you also have to factor in that drinkability factor, because Blanton's, to me, I mean, you guys know this. When you drink Blanton's, just like Scott said, it's nothing that's going to blow you away. It's really easy sipping. It's sweet. It doesn't really leave a burn at all. So, and I think people dig that about it. They really do.
I would dig that too, but the fact that it's, most people can't get it for, I would say, less than $50 and probably more closer to $60 a bottle. That's tough. If it was $25 a bottle, I'd probably be in all day. But the fact that we're over 50 anywhere you try to find this bottle, if you can find this bottle, is troublesome, because it's like you said, it's easy drinking, but it's really nothing special.
Yeah, and Buffalo Traces, 8 years old ish, 8 to 9 years old, and half the price.
You know,
Yeah,
and
exactly. That's a good argument. I mean, I guess you could kind of say the same thing. Like, good point. You know, Buffalo Trace is very on point with exactly what you get with Bland's, except it's not in as fancy a bottle, and you've got what, 4 more proof to it in Blanton's, and I mean, yeah, it's just gotten, you know, I mean, it's hopped aboard the hype train is what's happened, and you know, the bottle is, you know, very iconic. Everybody loves what it looks like, and you know, so
we can't forget about that beautiful horse racer on top.
Exactly. There's another perfect marketing thing. Look, I mean, you can send your little horse racing guys into Buffalo Trace, and they'll send you back a nice little whatever, like a little bourbon or a little barrel stave, and you know. So yeah, I don't think anyone's sending Buffalo Trace caps in.
That's true. Right.
I mean, there's the hype around it too, with it being like the first single barrel product, and I mean, we've had this discussion before on the another round stream where it's like single barrel doesn't mean it's anything special, you know. Store picks can be special because someone's selecting, you know, a particular flavor profile, but with Blanton's, you just get what you get. It just happens to be a single barrel, which in my experience really doesn't tend to be a good thing. So.
You know, I don't go back 4 or 5 years, and you would see Blanton's here, you know, around Wichita, Kansas. Most stores, I mean, you might see 2 bottles, maybe only 1 bottle on the shelf, but most stores you would go into would have at least a bottle on the shelf. And then they started to disappear, and it was probably about 2 years ago, though, I think, that it just disappeared altogether and became the highly sought after bottle that it is.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if Buffalo Trace held back, you know, either held back some inventory, or when the bourbon boom happened, they weren't prepared to have enough inventory of Blanton. So maybe that's what happened. And now that they're up to speed, you're starting to see more of it in places. But, you know, a couple stores will get 2 or 3 bottles and they're gone in seconds. Just even though there's probably better stuff sitting on the shelf right next to it, people don't care.
Yeah,
they see that bottle and they're like, oh, I'm getting Blanton's. So
yeah.
I need that S horse.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, not only do you factor that part of it in, but I mean, that thing is marketed like there's no tomorrow. Everybody knows, and we all kind of, I mean, look at what we're doing right now. I mean, we're talking about it, you know, just amongst us, and other people who may, you know, think they enjoy it more. They're out searching for this stuff more than we are, you know. So
Eric Wade is blaming the Russians in the chat.
So I was thinking about this the other day, this past weekend. I popped open some Booker's and started drinking it, and realized when I'm doing my reviews of cask strength whiskey, I'll drink it neat. For the reviews, it's always neat for me. But when I'm enjoying it at home, there's always a splash of water. Do you guys actually drink your high proof, I mean, your barrel proof whiskey neat when you're just sipping?
I do. I mean, I don't ever really put water in whiskey unless I'm just trying to experiment with it. But for the most part, I've never really found a whiskey that I enjoyed better with water in it, at least with bourbon. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I drink it all at what it's bottled at.
Yeah, I add water, and with barrel proof stuff, cask strength stuff. Now, okay, so most whiskeys, I'm going to add just a few drops of water. Really, even if I sit down with a 40%er, I'll still add, a couple drops of water. Why? People say to. But cask strength stuff, I'll probably add a couple splashes of water. Think Elijah Craig barrel proof, 65%. I'm going to add a couple splashes of water. I got a little trick. Your water or your refrigerator water dispenser, if you just tap it, it just throws out a little spurt of water. Usually that's about what I'll do, and mine's just right. It just comes out with just a splash of water. So my barrel proof stuff though will take usually two taps of the refrigerator water.
Two taps.
Scientifically measured.
That's right. It's close enough most of the time.
I would say for the most part, I don't add water. The one thing I have added water to, Jason's got some sitting right there, is the Stag Junior. For whatever reason, it's one of those those barrel proof whiskeys that drinks so hot to me. And I think sometimes a little bit of water does help that. But other than that, for the most part, I drink just about everything neat.
Yeah, I agree. I lean towards probably both Scots here. But for me, it really depends on how the whiskey is actually drinking. Some of the Elijah Craig barrel proofs, most of them I could drink neat, but there's a couple in there, a couple releases that just drink way hotter than the other ones. So I'll add a couple drops just to kind of kill the alcohol a little bit, and then it just makes it a little bit more of a pleasant dram. I still don't put ice in it, but a couple drops of water can go a long way with something that is drinking a little too hot.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm always like amazed when people, whether they're doing reviews or whatever it may be, and they're adding water to things, and they take like entire spoons and just dump like an entire spoon of water like into the drink. I mean, I think a little bit goes a long way with it. It doesn't take much to really open up a whiskey, I'll tell you. And here's another thing, and maybe you guys do the same thing, but I would say all barrel proof most of the time, I usually let the stuff sit for 10, 15 minutes, maybe even 20 minutes, just to let some of that alcohol kind of burn off. And that seems to help a little bit, you know.
Now, what I won't add water to is older single malts that are barrel proof. They don't. A lot of them, to me, don't seem to hold water really well. But I'll do the same thing. I'll just pour it and sort of let it sit in a glass for a while before I go to it.
Actually, I'm an advocate though of adding water, and I think probably 4 out of 5 bottles or 9 out of 10 bottles, it does change the whiskey a little bit, sometimes quite a bit. You know, adding just a drop of water. And I mean, a very few water doesn't change at all. But so, I mean, that's the main reason I'm a proponent of it, is just actually trying it, both drinking it neat and having it with water in it. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely, for experimentation, just kind of see what it does to the whiskey. It definitely, I think most of the time it definitely waters it down, maybe tames it down a little bit. But yeah, sometimes every now and then you do it, and it really opens up flavors which you won't get neat.
Which is weird.
Yeah, for me, a lot of times the water just a lot of times sweetens things up a little bit. I don't know what it is, but things tend to get really sweet when you start adding water or sweeter.
It's almost like the barrel influence, all those wood sugars and stuff really pop out.
Yeah.
All right. So I poured my second drink, Maker's Mark Private Select from the original Bourbon Club here in New Orleans. Fantastic.
Oh, I've heard good things about that bottle.
I just posted a review today. It's delicious. Then again, I haven't had a bad Maker's Mark Private Select.
What's the breakdown of staves in that bottle?
This one is 3 American Pure 2, 3 Seared French Cuvée, 2 Maker's 46, and 2 toasted French spice.
Wow, so no oak in that one. That one must be pretty. That one must be really sweet and spicy.
Yeah, that's a good explanation, because the last 2 staves go a long way. A little bit goes a long way.
Yeah, the Makers and the French really do add a nice spice to it.
Well, that would be interesting. I mean, talking about adding water to something, with all of those different, layers that are building to kind of create that whiskey, if adding a drop of water or 2 to that would really change something like that, bring out something, reduce something, whatever it may be.
I found it to just a little bit of water, and just the one time I added water to it over the weekend. Right now it's 109 proof, so it's nice and viscous. It's syrupy. It just thinned it out a little bit. I didn't notice too much of a change. If anything, it just made it a little bit more aromatic on the nose, but for the most part, it's the same whiskey, just a little thinner.
Yeah.
Speaking of New Orleans, wasn't your New Orleans the Bourbon Fest, or what? Didn't you just have that a few weeks ago?
No, we had what did we have? Tales of Cocktail.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, okay.
That was a blast to get on the quarter and see. The quarter's just filled with spirits industry folks, which is nice for me, because all these brands come to my backyard, so I don't have to travel out to who knows where to do whatever. Although I love traveling, but it's nice when I'm 10 minutes away, and they bring all the whiskey goodies for me to try.
Bring it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring it to me.
So let me throw something out at you guys. So this maker's obviously is finished in different oak stays, but I noticed they don't put straight bourbon whiskey on here. It's just bourbon whiskey. All right, I'm assuming they're considering that to be a flavoring agent, and therefore it can't be a straight whiskey.
Well, no, or they wouldn't even be able to put bourbon on it though if they thought it was an additive.
Yeah, straight only denotes being 2 years. So I'm not sure why they wouldn't want to put why they wouldn't want to put straight on it.
Do you think sometimes when the term straight gets used that a lot of people may default like right away who may not understand a lot about whiskey, that maybe they think automatically with it being straight that it's only 2 years old, and to some people maybe they think, well, this is only 2 years old, I can get something else older. I don't know if that's the case, but I mean, it seems like it's a very loose term.
It is.
I think if you knew what the definition of straight bourbon whiskey was, you'd know it's just at least 2 years old. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so your bourbon would be 15 years old, but you could still put straight on it. It's just
I mean that's what I mean. I think you hear a lot of people with just the term straight and 2 year. I think maybe there's some confusion with a lot of people that maybe they think that it's 2 years old. I don't know, because I get it, and I don't know why most places don't just put straight bourbon whiskey. I mean, short of they're not conforming to other bourbon rules and laws and all that. But I don't know.
I know one brand I won't mention forgot to put it on one of their expressions because their designers literally just forgot to put the word straight on there.
That's interesting. Okay.
I mean, geez, it's hard to forget something like that considering you've only got so many words on there, for crying out loud. So
yeah, it's actually interesting you brought it up because I recently I'm just finishing up a video right now that I worked on. It's a bourbon for beginners video. I put a lot of research and time into it, and I filmed it 2 days ago and a little bit yesterday as well to kind of finish it off. And I was going through some of the terms to look out for in a whiskey label. And when I was kind of going down the line, I was noticing, and I'm looking at the liquor store and I'm looking at different bottles and a lot of the terms people use and how so many terms on a whiskey bottle is meaningless. You have straight, which, definitely means it's at least 2 years. You have terms like bottled and bond, cask strength that, definitely mean something. But words like extra old, very rare, or a combination of those, special, even limited edition, when sometimes the distiller has no intention of limiting that specific whiskey. It can be very confusing out there. So actually, when I was doing the research, I even was adding more terms that I was finding on all these different.
Like small batch is one. There's no definition for small or single barrel.
Small batch can be 2 barrels, or it could be 2 million barrels. You don't know how they use. It's just called small batches. And also, one interesting term that came up was handcrafted. Now, I get handcrafted, but if you've done a lot of distillery tours like I do, the entire process of distilling nowadays is a dude on a laptop that can control every part of the process. And I know there is some type of handcraft that goes into testing the grains and checking everything, and before it gets into, the process of fermentation and everything else. But I mean, is it really handcrafted? I don't know. Just a lot of weird marketing terms. It was very interesting when putting together that video.
Yeah, considering it's
there's a lot of terms out there like that too.
What's that?
I was saying there's a lot of terms out there too. Like if you take like foolproof, what does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything necessarily. Like you take 1792 foolproof, yet every bottle's the same proof. It's not, quote unquote cask strength. They're diluting it to some extent. They're controlling that proof somehow or another. Like, what does that mean?
I think in that case, it's proof that it went into the barrel.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Could be, and I'll tell you, a lot of times if I'm picking up, if it's a Jim Beam, a Maker's Mark, like you got there, Bobby, I wouldn't even notice if it said Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey or if it just said whiskey. I don't look for it on those for the most part. About the only time I do is if someone points out a newer distillery, a small distillery, a craft distillery, I'm going to look to see a lot of times. That's because early on I got snookered with a whiskey. And I thought it was going to be good. And then I got home, I was like, "Oh crap! This is just a whiskey." Abort. They wouldn't take the bottle back though. But no, most time, if I'm picking up Jim Beam, a Booker's, like the Booker's, the Little Book #2.
Yeah.
I don't care what it's labeled. It's a Booker's. It's a special edition. I know it's something they put out there, and I'm going to pick it up and try it. So.
Yeah, I mean, for us who kind of know what you're going to get, but for a consumer who doesn't know what the hell is on these labels, it could be kind of. There was a really interesting bottle I saw. It was a Jefferson's bourbon. I don't remember exactly which one it was. I think it was a Jefferson's Reserve. So it says Jefferson's Reserve. It says very old, extra aged. Like every marketing term you could think of, they threw on the front of this bottle. No, it was very small batch. Yeah, very small batch. Yeah, very well. I don't know what that means. Very small batch, extra aged Kentucky straight bourbon. And I was
I've seen that one too, and it's like $37 or
exactly. Yeah,
I'm like, well, it's not that rare if it's only $37.
There's an old Russell's Reserve, the old label. One of them had small batch single barrel. I mean, it doesn't get smaller than that.
Yeah,
barrel.
Yes, I've seen that before, and I don't. And now when you see a lot of the Knob Creek picks, it says single barrel small batch. Like it's got to be one or the other. I mean, it's impossible to have a small batch from one barrel. That's not even possible. I mean, I don't even understand how, like, Knob Creek, you look at a lot of these single barrel store picks and it says single barrel, whatever the proof is, small batch. No, it can't. Take your pick. It's got to be one or the other.
I think they use the same labels for some of those. But what the weirdest to me on the Knob Creek, the store pick barrels, is that they're like 150 bottles. If you notice, a lot of them are marked bottle 1 of 150.
Yep.
And it's like there's a hell of a lot more bottles in a barrel than 150.
Oh, I guess depends on the angel.
Depends on. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these Knob Creek picks are 14 years old, so you may be having a significantly less amount of whiskey at that point.
Yeah, I just got one in Nashville that was 15 years old, and yeah, I mean, there wasn't many bottles available apparently.
I think they're splitting some barrels.
I would guess that too, kind of in the same way that you think about Eagle Rare. And they took off the single barrel connotation just because some barrels that won't finish a bottle, you might get some juice from another barrel to finish off that bottle. So you'd have to take off the single barrel term, which is, which I actually think is kind of a fair term. But for the most part, you are getting a single barrel for Eagle Rare.
Well, I guess with that being said, so do we think maybe some of these Knob Creek single barrels are actually technically a small batch? Maybe they're 2 barrels that they're blending, and I don't know. I don't know.
I've been to a couple of Knob Creek barrel like picks where you're picking them, and no, they tell you exactly where each barrel came from in the warehouse. I don't remember. I don't think it gives you a bottle count on the label. I can check.
So George Kaplan brought up a interesting point, and when I was kind of looking at the different bottles, I kind of noticed it too. What if small batch is not it's not what they're doing post age? They're not batching barrels to make a flavor profile. It has to do with what they're doing when they're creating it rather than bottling it.
But the batch itself is small. The amount that they put into a barrel is, 50 gallons, but the batch itself was hundreds of gallons. So I don't know how that's small.
I'm
Yeah,
trying. And I can't remember what it was.
By definition.
Go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
Even by definition, I mean, a batch is more than one, correct? I mean,
yeah, but there's no definition for how many. It's either 2 or 2 gazillion. You could go as high as you want.
I know, but I guess that's my point. Is how can a single barrel have small batch on the label?
Listen, I'm with you. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't get it.
He'll argue that a single barrel is the smallest batch. So
unless literally it's just like I mentioned earlier, unless literally it's just something a designer forgot to take off and no one noticed it or didn't care about taking it off.
You know, it's on the new ones though. I was just looking at the new bottling.
It's the same.
On the new one, it still says it.
Yeah.
It says single barrel small batch.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
The single barrel select Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey small batch.
Well, it's true technically.
Maybe that's part of the name. Maybe we think small batch or something. Maybe it's called the small batch. Maybe that's the name of it. Hell, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
I mean, Knob Creek was part of the small batch, selection there at their line. So,
and speaking of which, you guys heard about Baker's is now a single barrel, 7-year-old, 107 proof single barrel.
Yep. Which I think is just going to make it more. I think it's going to create more buzz around the bottle because Baker's has always been kind of the forgotten bottle. I just reviewed it not that long ago just for that reason because I hadn't reviewed it and I haven't really dived into it because it's kind of the forgotten son of the small batch range for Jim Beam, and I think it's a great bourbon. But I think some people are pricing it way too high for what it is. I feel like if you can get it now, John, you saw some near you for what? It was like $30.
Yeah, $30 at Costco.
I think
get them while you can.
Yeah, I think for $30, it's an absolute steal of a bourbon. But here in Ohio, they price it here at about $55.60, which I think is way too high because I can go $15 higher and get a Booker's.
Yeah, it's $40 here. It's all over the place. $42, and I'd be fine paying $40 or $42 for it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm curious what the new single barrel release is going to be priced at if they're going to go.
You just can't. Whenever you go out anywhere, you just can't order like a Booker or a Baker's anything, or you just get Maker's Mark. That's what they give you because they don't understand what the hell Baker's is. So they just keep giving you. They just keep giving you Maker's Mark all night long. So.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too, Bobby, because anytime they rebrand or redo things with these products, it seems like the prices are always coming up. I mean, the Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond is probably one of the good, more recent examples. They changed the packaging, same product, year older, and now it's triple the price.
Now, am I the only one in America that thinks like the new price sort of reflects what the whiskey is now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with I agree with everything they did as far as. From a business perspective, I mean, it sucks for the masses. What I did have a problem with is they didn't make it available to people that live in Kentucky off the bat. That is where it pissed me off. I think from a business perspective, you can't be selling 6-year-old bottled and bond bourbon that's that good for $17 anymore or $14, whatever the hell it was. You can't, in this market, today's day and age, the way the business side of bourbon is, you're losing money, and they know that, and so they had to do something. And I understand what they did. It's 1 year older, $40. It's already got a name attached to it. It's got a story to it. It's the Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond Kentucky only bourbon that's now going to be available to the masses, and it's now 1 year older and $40. But guess what? All of you in Kentucky that talked about it for all these years and made it what it is, we're not going to give it to you at release. That's what pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I don't even live in Kentucky, and I thought it was messed up.
Do you think they can continue to sell this very old Barton for $15? It's very old,
Yeah,
very,
very.
Is it worth $15?
I don't know. I haven't opened it yet. I'll let you guys know soon.
Which one was it? Is that the 80 proofer, 86? Which one was that?
100 proofer.
Oh, the 100 proof. Okay, that's worth $15 all day long. Easy.
Yeah, it's pretty decent whiskey.
John,
They
you
don't
should just
sell it
open,
around me. I had to buy it when I was in Tennessee, but
just open it up and chug it real quick for us all.
all right.
Let us know what you think.
Then he'll be
It's
very.
yeah, if you can get the 100, if you can get the 100 proofer. But I guess going back to what Jason said, now with all of us knowing what the Heaven Hill bottle and bond tasted like when it was in the old bottle and this and that, it wasn't $40 and 7 years old. Are you guys still now okay with paying $40 for a 7-year-old? I guess I'll say right away, I am. I liked it, and I think when you compare it to a lot of whiskeys and prices nowadays, I still think $40 is a decent value. I'm okay with that.
I think anything under 50 these days is nicely priced.
Especially because you're getting a 7-year-old bottled and bond bourbon, which already screams quality, and you're getting it from a quality distillery for under $50. I still think it's a great value. I think it's obviously going to fly off the shelves at launch. Hopefully the production can keep up with the demand for it, and hopefully they get it and make it available to Kentucky people as soon as they can, because I still can't believe it. It's nuts.
I just poured some of the 6-year-old bottle and bond. I would pour out some in its memory, but that's the only bottle I have.
This is for me, and this is for my homies.
That's right.
Yes, for homies.
So
even that though, going back, I think we've talked about it in the past, maybe the last one, but the Dickel 13-year bottled in bond for $35. That surprised me when they released that at that price point. Yeah, I mean, they could have charged. I think they could have charged more than that for it.
So here's one of those things with them. They've got their Dickel 8 and their Dickel number 12, and most people sort of automatically think those as 8 and 12-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what you release in between that, if you release a 10-year-old, and want to charge whatever you charge, they're gonna say, well, there's a 12 one. So they're sort of cornered into a wall in terms of what they can deliver safely to the market.
Hey, here's a question for you guys with the point that Bobby just brought up. Should whiskeys or bourbons, whatever you want to call it, that have a number on it, should it be allowed if it's not actually an age statement?
Yeah, I mean, look at something like Jack Daniel's Old Number 7. I mean, it's so classic, it's so tied to the brand. I think as long as you're not trying to deceive folks, for example, if you had Old Charter 8-year-old and you take 8 in old or a year in old off and just keep the 8 where the age statement used to be, that gets a little tricky. It's a little weird.
Yeah, it's the same thing with like Benchmark. They left the number on there too, and it's just like it's misleading because it's not really part of the brand. Like the Jack Daniel's, I'd admit, is part of the brand. That's been there. Yeah. That's iconic. It's very recognizable. But I guess to some extent with these other brands, the number on it is recognizable. But it was always because that number was an age. Not Jack Daniel's, the Old Number 7 was never the age of the whiskey. So I think it's a little bit misleading when they take off years and just leave the 8.
I'd agree. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see that gone. I've fallen victim to that in the past, but
I think most people would. I think most people would fall victim to when you see a number. We all would probably associate that with an age, especially on whiskeys. So,
when they say aged however many seasons, well, a year in distilling, there's 2 distilling seasons in a year. So I mean, if you haven't aged 8 seasons, does that mean it's just a 4-year-old whiskey?
I mean, look at the speaking of Dickel, look at they have the Dickel 8 and the Dickel 12. Now, if you look at it, for a person that didn't know, they would think it's either 8 years old or 12 years old, but that's not what it means at all.
Yeah, when we reviewed the Dickel 13-year bottled in bond, we had a comment from someone that came in that said, "I'll just stick with my Dickel 12-year because it's cheaper." And
yes,
I know, and it's like that's not 12 years old. That's just
But I got a bottle of that bottle and bond, Scott. I think I told you, and I was really impressed with it. I liked it.
Yeah. Yep. Me too.
So one thing I thought was funny about it though was that it says distilling season fall 2005, but it doesn't say that it's 13 years old anywhere on it, which I thought was a strange move. Like if it is 13-year-old whiskey or 12-year-old whiskey or whatever it happens to be, why would you not put that age on it? I didn't get that.
It's funny. I just read a blog post about age statements, and some age statements aren't on a bottle, but they're in marketing materials. And isn't the whole point if it's, and I'm not saying, that isn't 13-year-old Dickel. I'm sure it is, but why not put it, to Jason's point, why not put it on the bottle?
Yeah, I don't know. Especially nowadays with everybody wanting age statements, why would you leave it up to, that it was, part of the distilling season or fall in 2005? Yeah, I mean, hell, it'd be a lot easier to stick 13 years on and everybody knows exactly what it is,
I mean, did they pull it out and tank it and then just bottle it later? I don't know. They were sitting on it for so long, they decided to throw it in a bottle and get rid of it. I just don't know, because I've been to Dickel. I went there when I went to Tennessee, back earlier this year. And it's not a huge distillery in terms of like size and scale. I don't know what their capacity to store barrels is, but it's not a massive place. And they don't seem to have I mean, obviously maybe there's other places that I didn't get to see, but there wasn't a ton of barrel storage space or anything like that I noticed. So, I mean, maybe they don't have the capacity to store that many barrels and they tank the stuff.
Yeah, and I thought maybe something was up with it as well, because they didn't plaster it all over the bottle. But I think if you look at the advertising material from them, it states 13 year, and any website liquor store that you pull it up states Dickel 13 year as well.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, liquor stores are liars, though.
Yeah. Well, the master distillers said it. So, I mean, I tend to believe them over advertising.
Yeah, but I'm also wondering if maybe down the line they won't do 13 year again. Maybe it'll be a 12, or maybe it'll be an 11. So it saves them money in making new labels. It could be.
Still gonna have to change the label, though, because they're going to have to change the distilling season on it. So they're going to have to change something.
Yeah, they'll change the distilling season. Well, is that handwritten or is that printed on there?
No, it's printed. So they're going to have to make an alteration to the label regardless. Regardless.
Whoa, easy there, John.
Too much whiskey. I haven't even finished my first pour. It's kind of embarrassing. It's time for another one.
There you go.
Hey, Redbird 101's in the house. How you doing, man? Thanks for coming in, David.
Hey, David.
Everybody want to go through a new? Anybody drinking something new?
I just poured this Stag Junior Batch 9, and it's fantastic.
So I just poured. This is nothing probably most people are going to be able to get, but it is an MGP product. This particular one's called Turley Mill, and it's an MGP source. They're 95.5 rye. It's a 7-year age statement on it. And this one's out of a store called Jubilation in New Mexico that I went by. When I opened this, I was super unimpressed with it because I've had like Smooth Ambler's 7-year rye that they've sourced from MGP, and it's fantastic. Really good stuff. And this did not live up, so I was super bummed. But I haven't drank it in quite a while, so we're going to see what happens there.
Nice. That's a company out of New Mexico, or what? Or did you just buy it there?
I bought it in New Mexico. It's a store pick. It's a single barrel selection from this liquor store there called Jubilation that got recommended to me by a guy over on Instagram. And yeah, it's still not tasting amazing. Like it's all right. The Smooth Ambler versions I've had of this same whiskey are just much better. It's good.
Yeah. Now, for most of you guys, I mean, everybody's had a lot of the Smooth Amblers from even going back a few years ago. Do you sense or do you notice a difference now that there's so many companies still sourcing that there's maybe a bit of an issue, or that the quality of the whiskey from MGP has kind of declined? Because people will still, I mean, I've still got some of the old Smooth Amblers, and people will say, well, that juice that was now 11 years, 5 years ago is way different than the stuff that's, 7, 8, 10 years, now. Do you guys find the same thing, that there's that much of a difference?
I wouldn't say the quality necessarily, because you got to think, even if they're the same age, different parts of the rick house are going to age barrels differently, and two barrels sitting next to each other can be completely different, same age. So when they're picking, they're probably picking the flavor profile as opposed to
because now people talk about the older MGP versus the newer MGP, and I was kind of thinking about that. I said, well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I mean, from the standpoint of if they're still producing it the same way and still storing it in the same rick houses, I mean, other than just in general things changing, I mean, it really shouldn't be better or worse, right?
I mean, I think two things kind of factor into that. One being that, our memories aren't that great. You talk to any expert on memory, people's memory is not amazing. So if you're doing a mental comparison of what you thought it used to taste like and what it tastes like now, it's probably not a great comparison, number one. But number two, and I don't know the science behind this, and I'd love to hear someone that knows more than me talk about it, but I think it's really difficult to compare a whiskey that's been in a bottle for 10 years or whatever the case may be, like this bottle's the 10-year-old version of this, and here's the new version. They're both the same age and everything. You don't know what kind of occurrences happened to that older bottling in terms of, does it sitting in that bottle do something to it? And I kind of feel like it does, because everybody sits here and says how good all these old dusty whiskeys are. And as part of that, the reason that they are so good was the whiskey better made back then? Or is it that something's occurred over time in that bottle that causes the whiskey to taste different, in this case better? I don't know.
You got a couple of factors too. You've got the quality of oak in barrels, was probably better back then, and also not so much for bourbon, but in terms of like Scotch. I've got an old Johnny Walker Red from the late '60s, early '70s. That blows away anything that's out there now on the shelves. But that came from that's different distilleries, it's different production methods. So things change over time. Also for things like turkey, in the '80s, they were bottling much older stuff than what was stated on the bottle's age statement.
Well, and I think you see two people will say, we make it the same way we did 100 years ago. No, you can't.
No, you don't.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, it's all changed. I mean, maybe you're in the same geographical, grid location that you was 100 years ago, but your stills have changed, the methods have changed, the corn has changed, the rye has changed, wood has changed, everything's changed. So,
yeah, I think sometimes when people say that, the only thing that stayed the same is maybe the percentages of what the mash bill are. Everything else has changed. So it's like, yeah.
And quantities as well, for a lot of people. I mean, they maybe 100 years ago they were making, 10,000 liters a year, and now some of these places making millions. So,
yeah.
So I want to ask you guys a question. I got a sample of the new Basil Hayden Caribbean Reserve Rye.
Oh God!
Just stop it! Just stop.
So,
sorry, I'm glad you got a sample of it and you didn't buy a bottle.
Well, I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know.
Okay.
Live
review.
Yeah, right. So we touched on it in one of the earlier episodes where we talked, is secondary barrel finishing, if it's added flavor, that sort of thing. In this case, they're adding a little bit of rum to it. What are your thoughts on that?
It's wrong.
Why?
Well, because then it ceases. I think if you're going to straight up add a whole other whiskey to a barrel of bourbon, or I was actually trying to think of where in the process they're adding all this crap to. Are they doing it
probably in blending when they're blending?
Yeah, when they're putting it all together, they just add some port wine to it. I don't think it's bourbon anymore.
Well, I don't think they're claiming. I mean, it says reserve rye. So, I mean, obviously they're making you think it's rye whiskey, but
but I mean, I don't know. I just think it completely. You're throwing in another whiskey in there. I think it's just altering the entire flavor profile of it. It's I don't know.
Barrel finishing in wine casks or something like that, because you still have leftover wine in the casks. How is that? Because they're not adding a lot.
I feel about it the same way we had this discussion before, which is that I don't have a problem with them doing it. I think they need to let you know what you're getting into, so you kind of have a reasonable expectation as to what you're getting in that bottle. But, even with blending in other spirits, I don't have a problem with them doing it. But again, you got to, as long as you're disclosing what you're doing and as long as it tastes good at the end of the day, I mean, I don't care what you do.
Well, Basil Hayden says, I think on the label it says finished, but it's not really finished. They're just pouring it in there. But the laws of
finish the process by dumping some rum in it.
Yeah, the laws are very tricky there, so they don't really have to say anything. So,
I mean, that's where I have a problem with it. It's like, you need to let me know what to expect in buying this bottle, because as most of us know, like most places, if you buy a bottle of any kind of spirit, open it, taste it, don't like it, you're probably not able to take it back most places. So it's a little bit misleading to kind of guide you down a road where you're kind of set up to fail, maybe.
I agree. I just want I want it on the label. I want to be able to know if it's when that first come out, I thought it was Basil Hayden's finished in rum casks, and then later found out it's Basil Hayden's with rum added to it.
Yeah, same here. I thought the same thing too. I didn't realize there was like literally rum just being added to the rye whiskey, and here you go. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know who it's being marketed to. I mean, I guess I don't know, newcomers, or I don't know who that gets really marketed to, because I think most people who enjoy, bourbon or rye, or maybe even a finished whiskey, when they find out that you're literally just dumping, whatever, rum, port, whatever it is, into the whiskey. I mean, that's a whole different ballgame. Again, I don't care, but like Scott and, Jason said, John said, just be transparent about the whole thing. Let everybody know that it's not finished in something that's like an additive or whatever you want to, call it. So
Rare Bird just commented and said, guys, what about all the sherry season BS with Scotch?
Well, that's not sherry seasoned means that it's just the barrel's only held sherry for a shorter time than some. But I think that's probably 80 to 90% of your sherried scotches out there are coming from seasoned sherry casks, just because there's such a demand for it. And there's not enough people in the world don't drink enough sherry to provide the casks for sherry flavored or sherried finished scotches. So, and a sherry seasoned barrel, it can be just as good as one that's held. And I think seasoning means it's still held sherry for, I want to say most places is several months. And then they dump the sherry out rather than aging it for years. But
it's also traditional for Scotch. I mean, it's a few decades they've been doing that. So it's not like it's a new thing they just started 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah. Is it a bit misleading? I don't think so. I mean, when I look at a sherry, the thing is, I mean, that's going to give you your different levels. When you look at a Macallan is using mostly sherry seasoned casks. You get a finer, smoother, less, not necessarily a sherry bomb with most Macallans. But then you go to Glendronach's, more of a sherry bomb. So, I mean, it just depends, I think, on the whiskey, what you expect and what you're looking for. So, and then, I mean, there's some nights I love sherry scotches. That's my favorite. But some nights I just want a Macallan, or some nights I want a Glendronach. So it kind of depends on what you want.
Yeah.
There's another definition. That term seasoned, that's another issue. I think that becomes very kind of a loose term as well. I mean, what's the definition of season? Could it be a day or a year or 2 years? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if they have regulations on that. Do you know, Bobby?
No, but I think I've heard generally it's 2 or 3 years that they'll keep that the sherry in there.
Oh, is it 2 or 3? I was thinking several months, but it's 2 or 3 years.
This looks what I heard.
That could be.
Sure. As opposed to, actual old sherry casks that, like what was the Master's Keep from Wild Turkey a few years back. Used some, Eddie Russell found some really, really, really old 20, 30-year-old sherry casks, whatever they were. And it comes across in the final whiskey.
Yeah, and that's an example of doing finishing, I feel like the right way. You find something unique to add to the whiskey, but you're not pouring a whole other spirit into your whiskey. And then somebody in the chat said, yeah, it's like literally like you're buying a cocktail in a bottle.
But remember, some of that sherry, I mean, you get the color from those old casks. Some of that with liquid is still in in the barrel, so you're getting
I do get that point. You know, especially if it's a very wet barrel, you are going to get some liquid mixed in there. I don't know. It's kind of a I don't know. It's a kind of a weird thing when you think about it. I would like to know like exactly how much they're pouring in there. Because if you have a wet barrel, when it comes down to it, you know, yeah, you're going to get a good amount of flavor in there. But I just think it's a big difference in literally pouring in a whole other spirit when you're batching it together.
Sure.
And sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say with sherry casks, I think for the most part, they're and most casks that you're going to finish in, they dry them out. I don't know that they're used for the most part, most of the time wet. Now, maybe some are, but it's probably a small part. Most of them, I believe, are air dried for 2 to 3 years before they're used again to put whiskey in there.
Also, you're just looking at some of the color of some sherry bombs versus, you know, bourbon barrel aging. You get that reddish hue that you don't necessarily find. That tells me that this could have been wet barrels.
Yeah, you see a lot of whiskeys nowadays that have a lot of dark color. I mean, it's crazy some of the color that that they're picking up. And I mean, I think we all really understand that kind of color doesn't come from an aged 2-year dry barrel. You know, it just doesn't.
So I wanted to ask you guys one final topic. Grains, different grains. Are they the sort of the new thing? Like the new E.H. Taylor is using amaranth instead of rye as their flavoring grain. What are your thoughts?
I don't really think it's a new thing. I mean, you've been seeing craft distilleries do that for, the last few years. I mean, one that comes to, I was just in Nashville, and, a big craft distillery there is, what the hell is their name?
Corsair?
Yeah, Corsair. I mean, those guys are using quinoa, they're using oats, they have a what is it, like a 12-grain whiskey or a 12-grain bourbon they're using.
All right, so let me rephrase that statement. Major distillers, major brands.
So that's the thing. I think
Jim Beam's done it a few years back with their experimental collection.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. When a craft distillery does it, they're just releasing the bottles as is and saying, "Here, this is our 12-grain bourbon, or this is our oat grain bourbon, or whatever it is." When these bigger distilleries do it, it's experimental, and I think there's kind of a I don't know. I think that gives it kind of a lore, and now you have, like you said, you have the amaranth, the grain of the gods. Now that's been used by Buffalo Trace. If this starts becoming mainstream with the bigger distilleries, I think it could become more of a staple than just a trend.
I don't think so. I think it's just a trend. I think you'll see people experimenting with them, but I don't think you'll ever find something that's going to get in the what you'd call the big four. Corn, rye, wheat, and barley. I don't think anything's going to topple those.
Yeah, because if that was going to happen, one of these craft distilleries and what they're doing would have taken it over or had much more of a following already. But when the bigger distilleries do it, I mean, that grain of the gods thing that we all know that nobody's going to ever see it, or at least we don't know where it's going, where it's going to end up, and.
Well, if you want to spend $800 or something,
spend $800 on it somehow, yeah. So it's one of those things. When these big guys seem to do anything experimental, everyone freaks out and goes crazy, and it's usually not that big of a difference. I mean, I'm sure there's a big difference there's somewhat of a difference in the whiskey, but not enough to warrant what people are going to be asking for it.
When you got to keep in mind logistically for these big distilleries too, to add another grain, to a full-time lineup, like a fifth. Major grain that they're going to use logistically, that's probably problematic for them. They can't store this new grain. I mean, it makes problems, other than doing it on a small level. But I mean, in terms of people experimenting and doing it, I mean, I'm all for it. If it's good whiskey, then I'm all for trying new things and seeing what they can do. And I think that's kind of the fun part with craft distillers is they do have that ability to make these, smaller batches and experiment and try new things. But the only one here that can really probably speak on the amaranth and the E.H. Taylor is there's only one love child of Buffalo Trace in this room right now, Bobby. There's only one of us that receives every sample of everything they put out. So why don't you tell us?
Don't be hating.
Oh, I'm hating. It's only out of pure jealousy, though. Don't get it twisted.
Well, and think about this. I think a lot of the big guys allow some of these craft distilleries to produce something on a small scale, and then if for some reason it takes off, they'll just mass produce it as quickly as they possibly can. I mean, it's just it's kind of like you hate to say it, but I mean, it's like, there's the major leagues with the big boys, and then all the craft distillers are just kind of the minor leagues for the big guys, and whatever hits, they just take it. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, just let everybody else push the envelope, and whatever hits, we'll take that,
Yeah. And to, to John's point, some of the bigger distilleries, when they do something like this, it's a big investment for them. They're completely changing their production process and churning out millions of gallons of distillate to try something new. Whereas a craft distillery can easily, kind of shift and do something a little different. It may not be as good or as of a high quality as one of the bigger guys can do it, but
but then the problem is, even if you experiment with it, you don't know what you have for 4 or 5 years.
That's the thing. And recently I was at Buffalo Trace, and they have a bourbon Pompeii type thing that they excavated, and they found an old piece of copper that used to be one of the tanks that they used for fermentation, way back when Colonel Taylor was running the distillery. And they sent it in and had chemical engineers break down how to remake that copper tank, and they built one. It cost them I'm sure a shitload of money to do it, but they built one, and they
all paid for it.
Yeah, and they fermented some mash in there, and that whiskey is aging. If whatever was being fermented in that special copper bin that they did it's aging in the warehouse right now. They don't know how it's going to come out. They don't know what's going to happen with it, but they literally built 4 or 5 different sections in there to drop more tanks in it, but they're waiting to see how this whiskey comes out. So it's a huge investment for kind of a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we all know what's going to happen with it, though. It's going to come out and be $5,000 a bottle. I think we know that.
It won't even matter. It could be diarrhea in a bottle, and they'll sell it for $2,000 because it came from the great grand mash tank of the other one from 200 years ago, and they'll spin it with some marketing thing, and it'll be
small batch.
Yeah, small batch, exactly. It doesn't even matter what it is. I mean, it's piss in a bottle, whatever it is. People will buy it if you say it's limited or it came from a 400-year-old tank.
Yeah,
I mean, people they're
gonna name it Colonel Taylor's armpit sweat, and people are gonna buy it.
Exactly.
Well, but you know what? When it comes to stuff like that, I mean, there's that collectability, there's that fear of missing out, but also, I mean, the marketing stuff, it's easy to make you go out and buy a bottle. But the whiskey is sort of the deciding factor whether or not you buy bottle number 2, bottle number 3. I mean, unless you're just flipping them on I guess what used to be the black market until Facebook got rid of them.
Oh yeah, how about that? Just I woke up the other day and all the secondary sites were gone.
Oh really?
Oh, they're still out there.
There's some. Yeah. There's some left, but I love how they're renaming them. The best one I saw was FedEx Liquor Shipping Supplies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the name of the group. And then when you go in, it's like bubble wrap, tape, bottle of Colonel Taylor, Amaranth, Grain of the Gods, $1,000.
It doesn't. There won't be any stopping it. They'll be, yeah, exactly. They'll be.
Yeah, they're just finding other avenues on social media to do it. So nothing's going to stop it. So
no, you got that right.
All right, guys, we're right at our hour mark. So I think now's a good time to sort of circle the wagons and call it a night. Do you guys want to go through and remind folks where they can find you on social media?
Well, sure, I'll go. Yeah, so I'm Scott again with My Bourbon Journey. You can obviously find me on YouTube. Same thing with Twitter and Instagram. All My Bourbon Journey. So recently only been able to kind of really post maybe a video a week. I've just been too busy. But yeah, so if you want to follow me there, check out the YouTube channel. And yeah, thanks.
Scott,
we're all busy.
2000. Scott, did you get to 2,000 subs yet?
No, not yet. I'm working on it.
Come on, everyone, help Scott get to 2,000. He's close.
Yeah, I was so close. I'm so close. I'll even maybe do like a robe video or something like Chris from Bourbon Sane did. Something really nice.
You might lose a couple after tonight's performance.
Yeah.
I'm Scott from the Scotch Test Dummies. You can find us on YouTube, of course, under that name. On Twitter, we are Scotch Test Dummy with an I, and the real Scotch Test Dummies on Instagram. And I'll be live. I'm going to lead up or finish off with this. I'll be live with Jason tomorrow night on his channel. So, Jason, now you got to tell everybody what's about your video tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm going to be starting a little bit earlier tomorrow, guys. Going to be going on at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. I'm celebrating my 1-year anniversary for my channel, which just was actually yesterday officially when I posted my first video. So, yeah, going to have hopefully Scott could jump on. Hopefully Scott from my bourbon journey. Scotch Test Dummies, I know, is you guys are jumping on, and I'm just gonna put it out there to anyone who wants to come on tonight. Should be a fun. We're gonna be talking celebration whiskeys. What do you have in the bunker? What do you have that you only bring out for celebratory purposes? And yeah, so with that, you can find me at Mash and Drum on YouTube, the Mash and Drum on Instagram, and at Mash and D on Twitter. And keep an eye out tomorrow for my Bourbon for Beginners video.
Nice.
Cool.
Well, I'm John, Blind Whiskey Reviews. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at blind_reviews. And don't forget the very best blind whiskey review channel on YouTube. Don't get it twisted.
And guys, I'm Bobby Childs. You can find me Adventures in Whiskey on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and I'm Bobby Childs on Twitter because I'm too lazy to change it. And with that, cheers to everyone watching. Cheers to the rest of you gentlemen.
Salancha.
Cheers to another round.
Everybody.
Take care, guys.
Cheers, guys.